Annette Steyn, Deputy or Shadow Minister is your title, isn't it, for the DA, for Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries. What brings you here today, constituents or the party?
No, I'm here to represent my party. Whatever I do, I represent my party. But I came here because it's important to meet our constituents. It's important to meet the people that we represent in Parliament. As agriculture, representing agriculture, it's important to come and see what we do in agriculture and to meet with the people.
Do you find that trying to change policy or to get the government to understand where you're coming from a rather difficult task?
Yes, it is difficult. In the sense that, you know, especially for agriculture, I always say there's no place for politics in agriculture. But unfortunately, I find it quite difficult. I believe that since 2009 at least, that agriculture, the portfolio has been used as a political game.
Well, I think the word boer, which is becoming, was fashionable 20, 30 years ago, has become a non-entity. It's almost died now today. We talk about farmers. But do you agree that years ago, let's take 30, 40 years ago, if a farmer had a problem, he phoned Chris up, who was also owned his own farm, and he was in Parliament, and it got sorted out. And the problem today, possibly, and this is your biggest problem, you have no way of communicating with the government on what a problem really does exist.
Yeah. No, I must say, it's a massive problem. And I speak to many of the farmers and commodity organizations. That is their biggest challenge, that they don't have anyone that actually understands in the first place what it's all about, and secondly, that then can help them. So I'm trying to fulfill that role, but unfortunately, because I've been quite negative towards our minister, she doesn't really want to listen to me at this stage on anything that I say. So it's a difficult situation to be in.
What would you change drastically now if you could? If you were to be elected the minister tomorrow morning, what would you change?
The first thing, and we have long discussions about that, I'm very concerned about research. I think we've fallen way behind on agricultural research in South Africa. If you compare it with other countries, we are going to, I spoke to someone this morning to say, just as illustration, it's like the local government these days. Everything went a bit fine, but now things are falling apart because infrastructure was not kept in place. The same thing for agriculture. Our farmers, I think, are actually performing very well. But if we don't keep on putting money into research and making sure that we stay on top, we are going to, at some stage, fall behind. So research is one of the biggest challenges. And then the second one is also, and it's linked to research, is also putting massive help into communal farmers and small-scale farmers. Part of my work that I do is in Transkei area. It's my constituency that I serve. There's nothing happening.
I'm glad you brought that up because it's a point that I brought up to the minister at one point. The world is busy concentrating on larger farms because it's cost effective with capital equipment. Here you are in unison with the government somewhat saying you want to create smaller farms. Now that's against the world trend.
It is against the world trend, but if you look at the massive potential, the land and people that we haven't really looked into, and you can't say a person will never become a commercial or big farmer. There are very good farmers that just never get the opportunity.
But don't you and the government also have the same problem in another area? And you talked about the Transkei, which is a very good area, the Eastern Cape. There are tracts of land there that are tribally owned land, standing there, arable land, that's not being used. Now, before we start talking about taking land away from farms that are currently workable, shouldn't we be looking at that as an issue as well?
No, that is one of the biggest issues that the DA is driving on our land reform policy is exactly on that issue. We say in the first place, you can't take land, productive land, away from people that's currently farming while there's vast tracts of land lying there. So that's where we need to start. The other problem is with the system in the communal land where people don't have ownership. They can't find get money or loans, go to the bank. So nothing will happen there before we start looking into those areas.
Isn't one of the problems also that we have a terrible, terrible problem in this country of theft and dishonesty and so on? And when the government, and I've watched this happen, especially in Northwest Province, where certain small farmers are chosen to work and are given a certain amount of money and loaned tractors and so on, those that didn't get it then become anti and work against those that have got it. And then it's destroying from within at the same time. How do you overcome that?
Yeah, I know I might sound a bit over-optimistic, but I work in communal areas every day, not every day, every weekend of my life. The biggest challenge is that we don't speak to people. There's been this riots and toy about service delivery and everything of that. If you go and sit down with the people, no one come to them and say, listen, this is the plan. This is the 10-year plan. We're going to start here, we're going to do that, we're going to move there. People can actually understand that. But because they're being ignored, no one talks to them, they get restless. And it won't work everywhere.
I agree. You're dodging the corruption situation quite heftily there. There is a corruption problem.
Yeah.
I mean, let me give you another example. I have seen, and we've witnessed while we've been around filming, people that didn't get granted these quotas, that were rich, and they sowed dissension amongst the lower. I watched the riots going on in Duduans, in the valley there with the farmers. It was ring-fenced and contained until it got fed petrol on a bonfire that exploded. Now, that's exactly what those who don't get become agitators. Now, you can't give to everybody.
No.
So how are we going to show people, let a few get ahead, then it's your turn next and your turn next?
Yeah, no, it is a massive problem. The other thing is also, with rural development and land reform, which was supposed to be a capitalist or a catalyst for development, I always say to the Minister, if I was in government, I would have done it the other way around. Because what they've done is they've looked at the poorest areas and identified those areas, which is great. But it's not always the areas that's got the most potential. So you have to start looking at areas with potential where something can happen quite quickly. How you're going to get past other people coming in and trying to loot and vandalize is going to be a massive problem. But I really don't think that you can't overcome this. It's a whole lot to do with planning. The second thing is, because of corruption, I think a whole lot of money gets lost. Development could have happened a whole lot quicker.
Let's just move a little bit further afield with a couple more questions that I'd like to ask you. Biofuels, very big on people's minds at the moment. Farmers are even complaining that the fuel costs are ridiculous, and we're suffering a shocking fuel increase if one takes pro rata to earnings in this country. Biofuels could be the answer. There are two ways of creating biofuels. One interferes with the food chain, another doesn't. Algae creation on farms can give us biofuels. The other one it comes from the food chain. Now, I do know for a fact that the government is very, very worried that if it takes away from the food chain, it will create a massive problem. What's the DA's theory on this one?
Yeah, I think for the beginning, we will have to look at both, using both sources. The other problem is that I don't think there's enough, the sector is ready for that. I've asked the Minister the other day that at least there must be a 10-year planning process so that we can prepare for that. As I said, there's massive pieces of land that's actually unutilized. We can't export, in any case, everything that we produce, in most cases. So if we put some planning towards that, we can use soya or whatever if we properly plan for that.
But why isn't this spoken about prolifically? Why is it sort of brushed under the carpet when it is a serious problem?
Yeah, I think it's one of the reasons is there's so many other things that comes out, especially in the media and in having discussions that's what I said in the beginning. Agriculture is not supposed to be political, but because there are so many political issues that's basically on the table every day, we don't speak about these things that we actually need to speak about.